Daniel had always dreamed of the stars. As a child, he would sit by the window of his small house on Earth and stare at the night sky. He would whisper to himself that one day he would walk on another world. Now, years later, his dream had come true. Daniel was part of the first human exchange program with an alien race called the Thari. They were tall, graceful beings with silver-blue skin and golden eyes that seemed to glow even in darkness. Their culture was rich with song, ritual, and mystery. When Daniel first arrived, he felt like a stranger in a dream. The Thari city was unlike anything built by human hands. It rose out of the ground like living crystal, shining with soft light as if the walls themselves breathed. Streets curved like rivers, bridges glowed with energy, and towers stretched into the sky like frozen lightning. Everywhere he walked, the people watched him with curiosity. They whispered in voices that sounded like wind through glass. They did not hate him, but they studied him as if he was both guest and test. Daniel had been on the planet for only 3 weeks when the invitation came. A message carved into a shard of crystal, delivered by a child whose eyes reflected starlight. The message said the elders wanted to honor him at the Hall of Echoes. At first, Daniel thought it was a simple ceremony, perhaps a welcome feast, but his escort, an older Thari named Velan, only gave him a strange smile and said nothing more. The Hall of Echoes was a vast chamber cut into the side of a mountain. When Daniel stepped inside, his breath caught. The walls were alive with sound. Every step he took echoed back in soft chimes. Above him hung floating crystals glowing like moons. Hundreds of Thari stood in silence, their golden eyes fixed on him. In the center of the hall stood the elders, tall figures draped in silver robes that shimmered like liquid. Velan guided Daniel forward. The elders spoke in unison, their voices blending like a choir. "Human Daniel," they said, "you have crossed the stars. You have shown courage, you have shown trust. Tonight we honor you." Daniel bowed, trying to hide his nervousness. He thought they might place a crown on his head, or gift him with some alien jewel. Instead, the elders stepped aside. From the shadows she appeared. Her name was Lyra, and Daniel would never forget the first time he saw her. She was different from the others, smaller, with long silver hair that floated as if touched by unseen wind. Her eyes glowed brighter than the rest. Not gold, but a deep amber that burned like fire. She walked with grace, each step making the hall fall into deeper silence. Daniel's heart raced. Lyra stopped in front of him, her gaze sharp and unreadable. The elders spoke again. "Lyra, daughter of the House of Dawn, offers her bond to the human." A hush fell over the crowd. Daniel's mind froze. A bond? Did they mean marriage? Lyra bowed slightly, her hair spilling over her shoulders like liquid silver. "I offer my hand," she said in perfect English, her voice soft but steady. "I offer my life, my house, and my future to you, Daniel of Earth." The words rang like thunder in Daniel's ears. The hall erupted in chimes and voices, a chorus of approval. He could barely breathe. He looked at Velan in shock, but the older Thari only nodded. "This is a great honor," Velan whispered. "Few have been chosen. None of your kind before." Daniel's thoughts tumbled over themselves. Marriage to an alien, to someone he had just met? It sounded insane, but at the same time something about Lyra's eyes pulled him in. There was fire there, and something more, something hidden. He felt as if he had stepped onto a path he could never leave. His voice trembled when he spoke. "I accept," he said, his words echoing back through the chamber. The crowd erupted again, their voices rising like a storm. Lyra smiled, but there was something strange in that smile, something that chilled him even as it warmed him. The elders raised their hands. "Then it is done," they declared. "Human and Thari are joined. Tonight begins a new chapter." The hall glowed brighter. Voices sang, crystals rang with sound. Daniel stood frozen, unable to look away from Lyra. She leaned closer, her lips almost brushing his ear. "Daniel," she whispered, "you do not yet understand what marriage means here." Before he could ask, the music grew louder. The crowd swept forward, and she was gone, hidden in the sea of glowing eyes. Daniel stood in the Hall of Echoes, his heart pounding. He had taken an alien bride, but deep inside he knew something was wrong. Something was hidden beneath the beauty. The ritual, the cheers, he did not know it yet. But this marriage would not be between two. It would be between one man and many, and the price of his choice was only beginning to show. The day of the wedding came faster than Daniel could understand. One moment he was standing in the Hall of Echoes, lost in shock, and the next he was being led through endless rituals. The Thari moved with purpose, wrapping him in glowing fabrics, painting symbols on his skin with brushes dipped in silver dust. He felt less like a groom and more like a sacrifice. Though no one said such a word aloud, the city itself seemed to prepare for the event. Towers shimmered brighter, streets hummed with strange energy. Crowds gathered wherever Daniel walked, their golden eyes following his every move. He had never been the center of attention before, and now he felt the weight of thousands watching. Every cheer, every whisper pressed against his chest like a stone. Lyra was hidden from him until the final moment. The Thari believed the bride should be unseen before the binding. He asked about her, but the attendants only smiled in that unreadable way. It made his heart uneasy, as if they knew something he did not. Still, he told himself it was only a cultural difference, a strange custom, nothing more. The ceremony was held in the Sky Temple, a place Daniel had only glimpsed from afar. It was built on a mountain peak, its spires piercing the clouds, its floor made of translucent crystal that seemed to float in the air. When Daniel stepped onto it, he felt the sky beneath his feet. Wind rushed through the temple, carrying voices that were not human, whispers of old prayers, fragments of songs older than history. The elders stood at the far end, waiting in silence like statues carved from light. When Lyra appeared, the crowd bowed as one. She wore a robe woven from threads of living light, each strand shifting color with every step. Her silver hair was crowned with a circlet of crystal that pulsed like a heartbeat. She did not smile, but her eyes locked on Daniel's, and in that gaze was both warmth and warning. He felt drawn to her and yet unsettled, as if stepping into fire that could either warm or destroy. The elders raised their hands, their voices rising in song. It was not music Daniel could understand, but it echoed in his bones. They chanted of unity, of binding, of two souls becoming one. Then, without warning, the chant shifted. The word two became many. Daniel blinked. Unsure if he had heard correctly, the voices grew louder. The word many echoing again and again. He felt a coldness run through him. But when he glanced at the crowd, they only cheered louder. Lyra stepped forward and placed her hand in Daniel's. Her skin was warm, but beneath that warmth was a strange vibration, like touching something alive and electric. The elders placed a shard of crystal between their joined hands. It glowed brighter and brighter until Daniel had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, he saw strange marks burned onto his skin, glowing faintly like fire under the flesh. Lyra's hand carried the same marks, and she nodded, her face unreadable. "This is the bond," the elders said. "You are no longer two. You are now one with the House of Dawn." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices shaking the air. Daniel forced a smile, trying to hide his unease. But in the back of his mind, the word house echoed louder than the word Lyra. It sounded less like marriage and more like submission. After the vows, the feast began. Long tables carved from crystal appeared, covered with alien fruits, glowing drinks, and dishes that shifted color as he looked at them. Music filled the temple, soft at first, then wild, a rhythm that made his heart beat faster. Dancers spun in circles, their robes trailing sparks, their eyes never leaving Daniel. He felt like prey surrounded by predators who only pretended to celebrate. Lyra sat beside him, silent most of the time. Once she leaned close, her voice low. "Daniel, listen carefully," she whispered. "Our people do not marry as yours do. You will learn soon." Before he could ask, another sister of the house interrupted, placing food before him and smiling with eyes too sharp. Her gaze lingered on him as if she already knew him, as if she was waiting for him to understand. The night stretched on, filled with song and laughter, but Daniel felt the air grow heavier with every moment. The crowd seemed less like guests and more like witnesses to something greater. At the end, the elders declared the union sealed. Drums thundered, voices rose, and the stars above flared brighter as if the sky itself celebrated. Daniel lifted his cup, forcing another smile, but inside he felt a deep unease. When the ceremony ended, Valen approached him again. "It is done," the old Thari said, his eyes glowing strangely. "You are now family, and family here means everything." Daniel nodded, but the words felt heavy. Too heavy. He glanced at Lyra, hoping for comfort, but her eyes only held silence. It was the silence of someone who knew what he did not, and who knew the moment of truth was still ahead. That night, as the temple lights dimmed and the feast ended, Daniel realized he had stepped into something he could not escape. The wedding was over, the bond sealed, but the meaning of it all was still hidden. He had taken an alien bride, yet as he stood there among the Thari, he felt a strange truth pressing in on him. This was not a marriage between two. It was a door opening into something vast, something waiting in the shadows, and Daniel had just walked through it. The wedding feast was over, yet Daniel's mind was far from calm. He had smiled, bowed, and played his part, but inside he felt a storm. The strange marks on his hand still glowed faintly, reminding him that something had changed forever. When the elders declared the night complete, attendants led him through glowing corridors, away from the Sky Temple and toward his new home. The palace of the House of Dawn stood high against the mountain cliffs, carved from living crystal. Its walls shimmered in soft colors, pulsing as if alive. To Daniel it looked beautiful and unsettling, like stepping into the chest of a giant creature whose heart still beat. Inside the air was warm, filled with faint music that seemed to rise from the walls themselves. He wondered if he was dreaming, but every step reminded him this was real, at last. The attendant stopped before a massive door. Symbols glowed across its surface, swirling like fire and water. "This is your chamber," one whispered. Bowing, Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding, his mind torn between fear and excitement. The door opened silently and he stepped inside. At first, the room looked like a dream. The floor glowed with faint silver light. Soft cushions scattered across it, and crystal pillars sparkled in the air. In the center was a vast bed that seemed to float above the ground, covered in sheets that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Daniel's breath caught. It was beautiful, yes, but also strange. Too large for two people, almost endless in size. Then he froze. The room was not empty. Figures moved in the shadows. He blinked, his stomach tightening. One by one, shapes stepped into the light. They were women, tall and graceful, their eyes glowing in the same way as Lyra's, their silver hair falling like rivers of light. There were 5 of them, each standing silent, watching him for a moment. Daniel thought it was some mistake. "This is the wrong room?" he whispered, his voice shaking. But then Lyra stepped forward from the group, her amber eyes burning. "No," she said softly. "This is the right room. This is your home now." The women behind her smiled, slow and knowing. "This is my house," Lyra continued. "My sisters, my bond, my blood. You are not only mine, Daniel. You are ours." The words echoed in the glowing chamber. Daniel's heart skipped. Ours. The word sank into his bones like ice. He tried to laugh, though his voice cracked. "I thought marriage was between 2 people," he said, forcing a smile. The sisters moved closer, their golden eyes flashing like fire in the dark. "Not here," one whispered, her voice smooth like silk. "Here, marriage is not a joining of 2, but a weaving of many." Daniel stepped back, but the bed behind him stopped his retreat. He turned to Lyra, desperate for clarity. Her face was calm, too calm. "You are part of us now," she said. "Our people do not believe in 2, we believe in 1, and 1 is made of many." Daniel's skin crawled. He remembered her whisper in the temple. Her warning, but he had not understood until now. The truth stood before him, smiling with too many eyes. The sisters circled closer, moving like predators around prey. He felt the air grow heavier, as if the room itself pressed against him. One reached out, brushing her hand across his arm. Her touch was warm, but beneath it Daniel felt the same strange vibration he had felt from Lyra. It was not touch alone, it was something more, a pull deep inside his mind. He yanked his arm back, his chest tight. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The sisters answered in unison, their voices blending into a single echo. "We want you." Daniel's knees weakened. The sound of their voices together was too much. Like being pulled underwater, he shook his head. Trying to fight the dizziness, Lyra stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest. "Do not be afraid," she said, her voice almost kind. "You will learn. You will understand. You will not be alone." Her words should have comforted him, but instead they felt like chains wrapping around his heart. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The door behind him had closed, sealed with symbols that glowed faintly. The sisters moved on to the great bed, their glowing eyes never leaving him. They whispered words in the Thari tongue, low and haunting. Daniel could not understand the language, but the meaning pressed against his mind anyway. It was as if their voices slipped past his ears and slid straight into his thoughts. He shook his head, clutching his temples. "No," he whispered. This isn't what I agreed to. But the sisters only smiled, their eyes reflecting him like mirrors. Lyra leaned closer, her voice low. You agreed to me and through me. You agreed to us. Daniel felt his stomach twist, his breath short. Every instinct in his body screamed at him that this was wrong, that he had stepped into a trap woven with beauty and ritual. The room pulsed, the walls glowing brighter as the sisters whispered together. Their words blended, creating a rhythm that throbbed in the air. Daniel's heartbeat matched it against his will, his body responding to something unseen. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to resist. But the pressure grew stronger, pushing against his mind, pulling him toward them. Lyra's hand rose to his cheek, her amber eyes burning into his. You are ours now, she whispered. And we are yours. There is no escape, not in this life. Not in any life to come. Daniel stood frozen, trapped between fear and desire, between curiosity and horror. The sisters waited, silent and patient, as if time itself bent around their will that night. Daniel understood the first truth of his alien marriage. It was not love, not partnership, but something deeper, stranger, and far more dangerous. He had taken an alien bride. But he had gained much more than he asked for. And as the night stretched on, he realized he might never truly be alone again. Daniel did not sleep that night. He lay on the vast glowing bed, surrounded by Lyra and her sisters, but his eyes refused to close. Every time he shifted, he felt their presence, silent and watchful. They did not all touch him, but he knew they were awake, their golden eyes shining faintly in the dark like lanterns in a cave. At first he told himself it was only culture, a strange tradition he did not understand. But the longer he stayed in the room, the more wrong it felt. The sisters whispered in low voices, not always in the Thari tongue, sometimes in sounds that had no meaning, yet carried weight. When Daniel closed his eyes, he thought he could still hear them, whispering inside his head. He sat up, sweating, his chest tight. Lyra turned her gaze on him, calm and steady. You should rest, she said softly. Your body is tired. Your mind will soon learn. Daniel shook his head. No, he whispered. This isn't marriage. This isn't what I thought it would be. One of the sisters laughed. A sound like breaking glass. Of course not, she said, her voice smooth and cruel. You thought this would be between two. But you are in our house now, and the house does not share halfway. The words sank into Daniel like cold water. He stood, moving toward the door. But the glowing symbol sealed it shut. He pushed against it. But the surface felt like solid steel, unbreakable. The sisters rose from the bed, their movements slow, graceful, and terrifying. They did not rush to stop him because they knew he had nowhere to go. You belong here, another whispered, her hand brushing the marks on his skin. He flinched at the touch, feeling the same strange vibration he had felt before. It was not just warmth, it was a pull, a current dragging him into something unseen. He stepped back, gasping. What are you doing to me? He demanded. The sisters only smiled, their golden eyes glowing brighter. By dawn, Daniel could not take it anymore. When the first light of the alien sun filtered into the chamber, he begged Lyra for answers. What is this bond? What do you mean I belong to the house? For a long time, she said nothing, her amber eyes unreadable. Finally, she rose from the bed and gestured for him to follow. She led him out of the chamber, down winding corridors carved into the mountain. The sisters did not follow, but Daniel felt their presence, as if invisible threads still tied him to them. The path ended at a small hall, its walls covered in carvings. Lyra lit a crystal torch and the room came alive. The carvings moved in the flickering light, strange scenes of humans standing beside Thari, their hands marked with glowing bonds. Daniel stepped closer, his stomach sinking. The carvings told a story, though not in words, but in images. He saw humans like himself, their faces proud, their bodies strong. But in the next carving, their eyes glowed gold, their bodies thin, their faces hollow. And in the final carvings, they were gone entirely, replaced by swirling lines, absorbed into the image of the Thari sisters. Daniel's blood turned cold. What happened to them? He whispered, his voice shaking. Lyra stood behind him, her voice calm and heavy. They became part of us, she said. That is what the bond means, Daniel. It is not only love. It is unity. It is surrender. It is sharing everything. Body, thought, and soul. Daniel staggered back, his breath caught in his throat. You mean they— Yes, she said, cutting him off. They joined the house. They ceased to be one. They became many, and in becoming many, they found peace. Her words fell like chains. Daniel shook his head, his chest tight. "No," he said. "That's not peace, that's losing yourself." Lyra's expression softened, but her voice carried warning. "Do not fight what you cannot escape, Daniel. The bond is sealed. You are ours now." Daniel clenched his fists, his mind screaming, "I'm not like them," he said. "I'm not going to let myself disappear." For the first time, Lyra's mask cracked, her amber eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you will suffer," she said. "The house does not forgive resistance." Daniel backed away. His heart hammering, he felt trapped like prey in a cage too small to breathe in. The carvings on the wall seemed to shift, the hollow faces of the humans staring at him, begging him not to follow their fate. His body trembled, but deep inside, a spark of defiance burned. He would not vanish. Not like them, not quietly. When he returned to the chamber, the sisters were waiting, their golden eyes watching. They smiled when they saw him, as if they already knew what he had learned. Daniel clenched his jaw, his thoughts racing. He was one man against an entire house, bound by something he did not understand. But he also knew one thing with certainty. If he wanted to survive, he would have to fight that night. As the sisters circled him again, their whispers pressing into his mind, Daniel made himself a promise. He would not surrender, not now, not ever. They might think he belonged to them, but they had no idea who he truly was. He was human, and humanity was not so easily broken. Daniel could not rest in the days that followed. Even when he closed his eyes, he felt the sisters watching him. Their golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and he never knew if they were asleep or awake. Sometimes he thought he heard whispers that came not from the air, but from inside his own head, whispers and voices he did not know. Yet they carried words that belonged to him, memories only he should have. The palace was beautiful, but to Daniel it had begun to feel like a prison. Walls of crystal that once amazed him now looked like cages. Every corridor hummed with energy, and he felt as if the walls themselves were alive. Listening to his thoughts, he tried to explore, but wherever he went, one of the sisters followed, smiling politely yet never leaving him alone. He began to wonder if he was free at all. At night the unease grew heavier. He would lie on the glowing bed pretending to sleep, while the sisters whispered to each other in their strange tongue. When he strained his ears, he realized they were not speaking with their lips alone. Sometimes their mouths were still. Yet the whispers filled the air. It made his skin crawl. Worse, he began to feel their thoughts pressing against his own, like shadows brushing against the edge of his mind. One night, Daniel woke suddenly, his body trembling. He had dreamed of Earth, of walking through his childhood home. But the dream had not been private. When he opened his eyes, one of the sisters was sitting beside him, her golden eyes fixed on him. "You miss it," she whispered softly. "Your home, the blue sky." The sound of rain. Daniel froze, his mouth dry. He had not spoken those words aloud, yet she knew. He sat up quickly, pushing her hand away. "How do you know that?" he demanded. The sister only smiled, tilting her head. "You are part of us now. Daniel, we feel what you feel, we know what you hide." The words struck him like a blade. He realized then that the bond was not just tradition. It was invasion. They were inside his thoughts, stealing the privacy of his soul. In the days after Daniel tested it, he tried to think of nothing, to empty his mind, but the harder he tried, the more they seemed to sense. One evening, he remembered his brother on Earth, and at that very moment another sister whispered his brother's name. The sound of it in her alien voice made his blood run cold. They knew everything. The bond was stronger than chains of metal. Daniel's suspicion grew. He began to believe they were not only reading his thoughts but also changing them. Small things at first. He would think of standing, and then one of the sisters would rise before he moved. He would feel hunger and food would arrive moments later. At first he thought it was coincidence, but the pattern was too exact, too sharp. It was as if they were guiding his thoughts, not just sharing them. The more he realized this, the more he feared losing himself. What if his choices stopped being his own? What if his memories became theirs? His voice blending into theirs until no one could tell the difference. Every time he looked at the carvings on the walls, the hollow-eyed humans stared back, silent warnings of what awaited him. Lyra was the only one who treated him with softness. When he confronted her, demanding answers, she did not deny it. "Yes," she said calmly, "we share thoughts, We share lives, this is the bond, you cannot hide from it. Daniel shook his head, anger and fear boiling inside him. This isn't sharing, this is theft, you're taking what's mine. You're taking me. Her amber eyes softened, but her words carried no comfort. You are already part of us, Daniel. The more you resist, the more pain you cause yourself. Her calmness made him furious. For the first time since the wedding, he shouted, I will not disappear, do you hear me? I will not become one of those hollow faces in your carvings. The sisters only stared at him, their golden eyes glowing brighter. None of them looked afraid. None looked guilty. They simply looked patient, as if they had seen this before, as if resistance was only a stage before surrender. From that moment, Daniel grew more suspicious of everything. When food was given to him, he wondered if it was meant to weaken him. When music filled the air, he feared it carried hidden messages to bend his mind. Even when Lyra smiled at him, he questioned whether it was love or control. Every kindness felt like a trap, every gesture like another thread binding him tighter. One evening, he sat alone in the chamber while the sisters whispered among themselves. He stared at the glowing marks on his hand, tracing them with his fingers. The marks pulsed faintly, and when he pressed them, he felt a vibration under his skin. It was not just a symbol, it was alive. Something inside him was linked to them, something he could not cut away. His chest grew tight with panic. He realized then that he was not just living among them, he was becoming them, piece by piece, thought by thought. The suspicion that haunted him turned into dread. If he stayed here, if he let them inside too deeply, there would be nothing left of Daniel. No earth, no childhood, no dreams of stars, only the whispers of the house echoing forever in his skull. That night, as the sisters drew closer, Daniel forced himself to stay calm. He smiled, pretending to accept, pretending to relax. But inside his mind screamed. He would not give in. He would not lose himself. The sisters might think he was already theirs, but he still had one weapon left, his will, and he swore to himself that he would find a way to use it before it was too late. Daniel's suspicion had turned into obsession. Every moment he watched the sisters, searching for signs, for cracks in their perfect masks. He smiled when they smiled, spoke when they spoke, but inside he was counting their steps, their whispers, the way their eyes flickered when he thought of something private. He knew they were in his head, and he feared that soon they would control not only his thoughts but his very soul. One evening, when the palace had grown quiet, Daniel wandered the halls alone. The sisters had left him to rest, or at least that was what they wanted him to believe. He walked carefully, his bare feet silent against the glowing floor. Every corridor seemed to hum with faint energy. As if the palace itself was alive, shadows shifted across the crystal walls, and sometimes he thought he saw faces forming, only to vanish when he blinked. At last, he found a chamber unlike the others. Its door was half open and no glowing symbols guarded it. Curiosity pulled him forward, though his heart warned him to turn back. Inside, the room was darker, colder, filled with the scent of old stone. Crystal pillars rose from the floor, but these were cracked. Their surfaces etched with carvings. Daniel stepped closer, lifting a shard of glowing crystal from the ground to use as a torch. The carvings told stories, but these were not the grand tales shown at the wedding. These were hidden truths, scratched deep into the walls as if by desperate hands. He saw humans again, faces marked with fear, their bodies bound by glowing chains. He saw the Thari sisters standing above them, their golden eyes shining with hunger. One carving froze his breath. It showed a human man lying on the great bed, surrounded by sisters, their hands pressed to his skin. The man's face was hollow, his eyes wide with terror. In the next carving, his body dissolved into light, his form breaking apart into streams that flowed into the sisters. By the final carving, only the sisters remained, their eyes brighter, their faces calmer, while the human had vanished completely. Daniel staggered back, his hand gripping the wall. His chest burned as if the marks on his skin were alive. He looked down, and sure enough, the glowing bond pulsed harder. As if reacting to what he had seen, his mind screamed at him. The bond was not just symbolic, it was a trap, a way to feed on him, to take him piece by piece until nothing remained. Footsteps echoed behind him. Daniel turned sharply, his heart pounding. Lyra stood in the doorway, her amber eyes catching the faint glow of the crystal torch. "You should not be here," she said quietly, her voice calm but edged with steel. Daniel held the torch higher, pointing at the carvings. Tell me it's not true, he demanded, his voice raw. Tell me these are lies. For a long time. She did not answer. Her face was unreadable, but her silence was louder than any word. Finally, she stepped into the chamber, her silver hair glowing faintly in the torchlight. They are truths, she said at last. But truths our people do not share with outsiders. They are not meant for you. Daniel's chest tightened, anger flaring. You call me family, you call me husband, and yet you hide this. You hide what you really do to those you bind? Lyra's eyes softened, but her voice carried sorrow. It is not cruelty, Daniel, it is survival. Our house, our kind. We are one mind, one soul spread across many bodies. We cannot exist alone. When we bond, we bring others into us. It is how we live, how we grow. It is not death. It is transformation. Transformation? Daniel spat, his voice shaking. You steal lives. You erase them, you call it unity. But it is a cage. It is a death dressed as love. Lyra's face hardened, her voice sharper now. You do not understand, no human can. You cling to being one, to being separate, but we know the truth. We know that strength lies in the many, in sharing every thought, every breath, every secret. Daniel's fists clenched. I will never share like that. I will never let you take me. For a moment. Silence filled the chamber, then Lyra sighed, stepping closer, her voice low. You are already part of us. Daniel, the bond has begun. The longer you resist, the more it hurts you. One day you will see, and when you do, you will thank us. Her words chilled him more than anger could. He realized then that she truly believed it. This was not trickery to her, not cruelty, but faith, a way of life carved into her bones, that made her more dangerous than an enemy. Because she thought she was saving him even as she destroyed him, Daniel backed away, shaking his head. No, he whispered, I will not disappear. I will not become another hollow face on these walls. The marks on his hand pulsed harder, as if mocking his words, as if reminding him that time was running out. Lyra's amber eyes never left him, but she did not stop him as he turned and ran from the chamber. Her voice followed him, soft and haunting. You cannot run from what you already carry inside, Daniel. The house is with you always. When he returned to the chamber he now called his prison, the sisters were waiting. Their golden eyes glowed brighter than before. Their smiles sharper. Daniel forced himself to stay calm, to hide his fear, but inside he knew the truth. The bond was not love, not union, but consumption. He was prey dressed as a groom, and unless he found a way to break free, the House of Dawn would swallow him whole. The days after Daniel discovered the carvings were the hardest of his life. He could no longer pretend he did not know the truth. Every smile from the sisters felt sharper. Every word from Lyra carried weight. He knew now that the bond was not a gift but a chain, a path that ended in his mind dissolving into theirs. The sisters moved closer to him than ever. At meals they sat around him like a circle of fire. At night they pressed against him, their whispers crawling into his thoughts like vines. Sometimes he heard his own memories in their voices, retold as if they belonged to them. He began to wonder if pieces of him were already gone. Swallowed quietly when he was too tired to fight, one evening, the elders summoned him to the Hall of Echoes once more. The chamber was filled with silence. Heavy and waiting, Lyra stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Though it felt less like comfort and more like control, the elders spoke as one, their voices rolling like thunder. Daniel of Earth, the time has come for choice. Daniel's stomach tightened. What choice? He asked, though part of him already knew. The elders raised their hands, their golden eyes burning. You are bonded to the House of Dawn, but the bond is not yet complete. You must give yourself fully, or be cast aside. The word cast aside echoed in the chamber. Colder than death, Daniel forced himself to stand tall. And if I refuse? He asked, his voice steady though his chest hammered. The elders answered without hesitation. Refusal is rejection. Rejection brings shame to the house, and shame must be erased. You will not leave this world alive. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Daniel felt the weight of every eye in the chamber pressing down on him. The sisters stood behind him, their golden eyes glowing brighter. They were waiting, patient and calm, because they believed he had no choice at all. Lyra leaned closer, her voice a whisper only for him. Do not resist, Daniel. Surrender brings peace. If you fight, you will only suffer. But Daniel's heart flared with fire. Peace, they called it, but he saw only death. Not the death of the body, but of the soul, of the self. To him, That was worse than any blade. He clenched his fists, refusing to bow. The elders extended a crystal shard, glowing faintly. "This is the final seal," they said. "Place your hand upon it, and you will be one with the house. Forever." Daniel looked at the shard, at the marks already glowing on his skin. Every part of him wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere left to go. He knew if he placed his hand on it, Daniel would cease to exist, and only the house would remain. Slowly he shook his head. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling but firm. "I will not give myself to you. I will not disappear." The hall erupted in gasps, the sound like a storm tearing through the air. The elders' eyes blazed with fury, their voices rising as one. "Then you choose death." Lyra's hand gripped his arm, her nails sharp against his skin. "You fool," she hissed, though her eyes shone with something like sorrow. "You cannot win against us." Daniel met her gaze, fire burning in his chest. "Maybe not," he said, "but I would rather die as myself than live as nothing." The elders raised their hands, energy crackling in the air. The walls of the hall pulsed. The crystal floor shook. Daniel braced himself, every muscle tight. But then something strange happened. The marks on his skin flared brighter, not with the calm rhythm of the house, but with wild, uneven pulses. The elders froze, their song breaking. Daniel looked down at his hand in shock. The glowing lines blazed like fire, but they did not match the sisters' rhythm. Instead, they beat in time with his own heart. He felt heat flood his chest, power rising not from them, but from himself. The sisters stepped back, their golden eyes wide with surprise. "He resists," one of them whispered, her voice breaking. "No," another hissed, "it is impossible." No one resists the bond. But Daniel stood taller now. His breathing steady, he felt their pull against his mind. But it no longer crushed him. He pushed back, and for the first time, the whispers inside his head fell silent. The elders roared in anger, their voices shaking the chamber. "This cannot be. The bond cannot be broken." Daniel's voice rang out, strong and defiant. "Maybe not broken," he said, "but I am not yours. I will never be yours." For the first time, the sisters looked afraid. They drew closer to each other, their whispers fast and sharp. Lyra stared at him, her amber eyes wide. "You are different," she whispered, almost in awe. "No human has ever—" She stopped, her voice trembling. Her sisters pulled her back, their fear growing as Daniel's mark flared brighter still. The elders lowered their hands, their golden eyes narrowing. "You have chosen your path, Daniel of Earth. It will be war between you and the house, and war brings only pain." Daniel lifted his chin, his heart steady. "Then let it be war," he said. The chamber shook again, the song of the house echoing in fury. But Daniel stood firm, his fire burning brighter. He knew now that he had made his choice. It was deadly, yes, but it was his. And as long as he still breathed, the house would never own him.